Welcome to the Market Musings podcast, where we welcome back Charlie the Geo to talk to us about a couple of companies from a geologist's point of view. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, chaps. Thanks for having me back on, eh?
Yeah, it's good to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be back again, Charlie. It's probably about a month since we last spoke. I'm just trying to remember the companies we spoke about last time. It was Iron Ridge Resources. My memories went blank.
Goldstone and Pensana, I believe.
Oh, your memory's fantastic.
All of which, they've had a bit of a run since then.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh well,
especially
you've got 100.
The gold price.
Yeah, definitely. You've got 100% record to keep up with. Then, if your three from the last podcast have all went on a nice run. So, who are we going to talk about tonight?
Well, today I've recently been doing some research on Panther, and as well as Red Rock Resources, which I'll have a broken out coming out in the next couple of days.
Great.
It's worth keeping an eye out for.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent. Good stuff. Yeah, I know both companies pretty well, and I think Mark's reasonably familiar, especially with Panther. I think I don't know about Red Rock, but it's quite a nice contrast because you've got one of the newest companies on the stock market against one of the companies that's been around for, Red Rock probably 2004, 2005. Probably 15 years Red Rock's been around. And obviously Andrew Bell's been there since day one, so he's a bit of he's a Sir Alex Ferguson of the AIM world, so he is. He's been around for ever and ever. But
No, he certainly has.
Yeah, longevity. So, who do you want to start with, Charlie?
Well, should we start with Red Rock?
Let's go with Red Rock. Yeah.
So, well, I guess the last few, one of the last podcasts we were talking actually about power metals and the Victoria asset, which that started to pick up quite nicely. I was fortunate enough to get some of the reviews, to look over some of the reviews of the licensed areas that they've got. And it's a really interesting bunch of targets that they've got to be looking at. I know they've got a late stage asset. They're all early stage, but one of them's got some historic mining on, some shallow drilling, and it's kind of a quite de-risked project. And then so that one they're going to be working on predominantly. I actually don't know what the name of that asset is.
That one's called it's Mountain Butte Gold Project, so it is. I think
you know that one quite well yourself, don't you?
Yeah. I think there's some shallow drilling. I think 10 out of the 14 holes hit gold mineralization, and I mean it wasn't fantastic grades or anything like that, but it was a fact. It was. I think there's 3 parallel anomalies about 1,200 by 200 meters wide, and they just stuck 14 holes and a tiny portion of it, and they've hit gold 10 out of 14. I think the biggest intersection was like 14 meters at just under 1 gram a ton, but there was no follow-up work done since that drilling campaign, and that was about 10-15 years ago. So I think the project's pretty much laid untouched since then. So yeah, it's a nice pickup for them, and it forms part of a bigger, quite a big footprint that they've got out there.
Well, these areas, they've definitely got these the large listric faults, and with these kind of secondary faults coming off them, and they seem to be quite extensively mineralized all the way along there. So just by proving with this historic mining activity and drilling activity that there is gold mineralization there, I'd certainly say it's quite a well de-risked project to be drilling out. But I guess the main thing that people need to understand about these projects and going to get their heads around is that they are highly nuggety, both in the context of physical nuggets as well as a more geostatistical variation that is worth noting. So actually, I can actually bring in one of the projects I've talked about previously, Iron Ridge Resources, which came out with some fantastic grades today. But it's a perfect example of a nugget effect where they've for a large number of their holes, they've been getting 1 to up to 6 grams per ton. think they've got 8 and 12 grams per ton in there as well, over numerous intercepts. But then suddenly today they've come up with over 1,000 grams per ton over a meter intercept. And that, to most people, you'd think, something's happened there, because there's continuous kind of grades within your intercepts. And they've now completed over 20,000 meters worth of drilling. And this is the first one where we're seeing these quite spectacular grades popping up. Now, it isn't because they've hit a high grade zone, it's because of this nugget effect. And the same thing happens over in in the Victoria Goldfields, these orogenic deposits, where difference between it's calculated as the variation of a single sample. So one sample could have, if you smash it up into break it up, and you split it, and you send those two samples off to a lab, they'll come up with two different grades. And the variation between those two different grades is what's called the nugget effect. Now, when you're drilling, you're not sending the full core to the assay. And especially when you're looking at RC or AC, you're actually taking a small proportion of that full sample, and you're trying to get that as representative as possible of your full drill core. And so as a result, it's actually really quite difficult to get a representative sample of a deposit which is highly nuggety. And the Victoria Goldfield sadly does suffer from the nugget effect. And it's something that investors should be aware of.
Yeah, I think ECR had a similar issue with Creswick, and they had to do the whole of bag sample process to get more accurate results. I think that's probably the same situation.
I was actually going to come on to that one in particular, because so what they did was they did a number of samples using, so they actually sent off the full bag of material to be assayed to look at the nugget effect, and they did a specific nugget effect assessment on the deposit. And what they actually found was that the nugget effect over there isn't too bad, actually, which is great for geostatistics. And it means that a geostatician, when they're doing the resource study, can simply take that data and they can create these assumptions of what the grade will be between drill holes that way. But it is key that the investors do note that actually when a drill hole intercepts particular structures and quartz veins within the drill holes, that's actually something to be taking note of, because you don't necessarily have to be going through grade. As long as you're seeing the structures there and they're the right type of either alteration textures or the right type of quartz veining, then you're actually telling us, okay, this is the right area. We've just been unfortunate this time to have hit the gold. And we could be talking about a couple of centimeters away, and you'll have a gold nugget the size of your fist, especially in Victoria. So it's something to note, and it's something I think personally that's what the Canadians understand, because in Canada there's a lot of orogenic deposits. They have this struggle with nugget effects, and that's why I think a lot of these projects are better suited for a more technical audience. But why not? London investors can get their head around it, I'm sure.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
I mean, with nuggets, then I mean, it looks nice, doesn't it? And sounds very nice. The headline. But is it mineable, or are you really looking for like a solid deposit?
The actual, if you're saying a particular, when people see a nugget, that's all well and good. It's great that the worst, I'm going to call it the worst thing, but that's not strictly true. But to have something refractory is generally more negative. So this is where sulfides build up around the gold particle, and as a result, it stays trapped. And other gold projects, you can just simply heap leach, like we were talking about Goldstone. They've got a weathered zone which they're simply going to heap leach all of that material, and it's extremely cheap. We can suddenly talk about gold grades being as low as 0.5 grams per ton and stuff like that, or even lower. You can really talk about these low grade deposits. Whereas, for example, in the Victoria goldfields, traditionally these refractory deposits which were found, you need, even today, over maybe 3 grams per ton for them to be of any interest. However, what made the Victoria goldfields suddenly more interesting again was the Fosterville mine. They hit a zone where there suddenly this free liberated gold suddenly appeared as well. So these deposits, they've generally got, generally speaking, they've got this underlying relatively low grade refractory material, as well as these zones of high grade nuggets. And that's suddenly what changed in 2016, was people suddenly realizing, this thing is very nuggety. Now we've understood the geochemistry, we can now apply that to our new models. And these areas which have got drilling, they have been mined, they've all got the potential to be holding actually some quite monster deposits, or very high grade deposits down there. So
yeah, so some of the nuggets are within the Red Rock GV footprint. The historical ones are absolutely huge. I think obviously I know a bit about this, so I think the Blue Ribbon, which is between Creswick and the Ballarat mine, I think they've had historical nuggets up to 85 ounces. And there's a tiny project, in fact it was number 11, I think the last license that the Red Rock JB picked up, Sardinia. I think they have 5 or 6 nuggets, with the biggest one up to 750 ounces. So there's some monster nuggets.
And how is it mined then? Forgive this obvious question. You don't just go in with the excavator and dig it up, do you?
These old timers, it was all shallow stuff, so I don't think they're going down much further than 100 feet maybe. I think it's probably the kind of depth that the old timers were going down before they started hitting water tables.
I think it might have been even shallower.
Reports
at around 60 meter open pits. So yeah, no, 100 meters wouldn't necessarily be unbelievable if they went underground as well.
So you would almost excavate it and send it all off.
Well, you can actually, even when you're doing open pits, you don't have to send all of that material off. Let's take today's what generally happens today is you create a resource model, you create a block model, and then you mine that block model. And you can actually be selective within that block model, where there's some fantastic. The process is called grade control, and there are some fantastic ways in which people can do this. But one way is you generally have a kind of a young mining geologist who puts a bit of tape out over a block area, which when it gets blown up, the excavator knows, because of color coding, that is the block to mine, and that's going to go to the high grade pit. This one's going to go to the medium grade pit. This is the low grade pit, and this is going to the spoil heap. These new techniques, and they can even use, and I love this one. There's this special, it's like a ball, which when they're doing grade control, they have these air core drill rigs which go in and put the blast material down. If they're blasting, that is. If not, they're free digging. But let's say they're blasting. They'll drill these the block that they're going to be mining. They then send down these little balls, maybe the size of tennis ball size, and it gets dropped down to the bottom of the block. One will be at the middle of the block, and they kind of make imagine a 3D box where they place balls within the block they're going to mine. So when they blow it up, they can model how the explosion moved the material, and therefore work out even to an even greater extent where they then have to mine. Because suddenly, let's say the material moved up and slightly to the left, well, you would actually be ending up missing some of that high grade material because it's been blown up and to the left, and the excavator doesn't get it. So they're actually able to. It's amazing, this kind of computer generating models for how this blast material works. Even the technicians behind the blast, do different blast patterns to make sure the ore moves in a certain way. Extremely clever stuff. But that's one way at which open pitting can be very selective and can completely change the economics of an ore deposit. To just give one more example of this, I'm working with a gold mine over in East Africa, and it was previously had a resource done by some Chinese. They did PFS, and the capex required was huge. The IRR tiny, and what they'd done is they'd drilled out this deposit. They had just whacked the kind of just an average grade over the whole thing, and just assumed they're going to mine the whole thing and put it through a processing plant. So they had to have a huge processing plant. Anyway, some new South African and Australian geos and mining engineers have come along, remodeled it, put in grade control techniques, and suddenly they've changed the average grade of the deposit from, I think it was 1 gram per ton up to over 3 grams per ton. The resource has gone from 1.2 million down to, I think it was about 700,000 ounces. But the economics of the whole thing completely changed. And because you now have to have only a smaller processing plant, you've got a smaller, less consumables to put in the processing plant, less trucking of these materials. All these things add up to how economic a deposit can be. There you go. There's a bit of a rant.
Okay.
Yeah, we got there. We got there in the end. So yeah, so obviously the Red Rock joint venture. I mean, they've got this footprint, Charlie. I mean, it's about 1,839 square kilometres. It's probably the 5th or 6th largest footprint in Victoria, within the goldfields anyway. What do you see as the Red Rock or the joint ventures options going forward with these projects?
Well, naturally, I think there's going to be they're going to have some drilling, and that's going to be on the most de-risked site. But there are other areas which they can bring up to drill-ready standards, or produce drill-ready targets with simple techniques such as soil sampling, more detailed geophysics. And these things are relatively simple and quick to do. Once they are up to drill-ready standards, that's an opportunity for them either to drill, to be bought out. I think we'll have to follow closely what companies such as Fosterville South are doing. They've got 2 drill rigs currently on one of their assets, and this is a bit further over to the east. But that's been coming up with some great drill results. I recommend anyone who is following Red Rock and Power to go and have a look at Fosterville South and their results that they've come out with. But they've done exactly the same thing. They actually own the license directly south of the Fosterville mine. And to get that into a drill-ready level to produce drill-ready targets, they've been doing some simple soil sampling along the major structure. And I believe they're getting ready to bring a drill. So this will be their 3rd drill rig down in Victoria. They're looking to bring that on site and start drilling this asset.
Yeah. I mean, Fosterville were actually pretty active today. They picked up, I think it was two or three small licenses, but I try to remember the name. It was Beechwood, I think, was the area, which is kind of in eastern Victoria. But that was another acquisition from them today. But they've been extremely active, and I can't see how they're going to change their model, because the share price is just climbing and climbing. They're able to raise money without any difficulty at all. I think the good thing about the Red Rock joint venture as well is there's plenty of historical data, so I think they can pretty much build up, some pretty decent pictures of what's going on in some of the licenses already, because there's been tons and tons of soil sampling campaigns done in some of the licenses. So yeah, I'm pretty excited of it. I mean, I hold Power Metal shares, and I'm now a Red Rock buyer as well. I just think there's too much of a a discrepancy between Red Rock and Pow. I just think that Red Rock's not really moved in comparison to Pow. It's not had the same exposure to the Victorian gold that Pow seems to have had. So it's definitely watch this space with the Victorian gold joint venture. I'm excited by it. But that's not all Red Rock have got in gold. They've got a few other
No.
gold interests as well.
Well, the other asset is the one over in Kenya, and I'm sure you guys have followed that somewhat since, when was it, 2011, 2012, when the Kenyan government, they ended up almost losing the license over there. And it's a fantastic area that they've got. Was it 1.2 million ounce resource, which it's over an orogenic system that they inherited quite a bit of drilling data on this land package. It's a southeast northwest trending greenstone belt, which is actually part of the same Victoria Lakes kind of greenstone belt orogeny area. And so Tanzania, this is something again to point out, is Tanzania has been locked down for the last few years, or explorers have kind of been locked out of it because of how the government have been treating miners. Quite a socialist, it's called a socialist government they've got over there, which makes exploration quite difficult, mining near on impossible. But things have started to progress over there. However, Kenya, a little bit more workable. However, Red Rock have had issues with the government there, which talking to Mr. Bell, he was saying they're very close to having that. I say very close. We will see when it's Kenya, but we'll see when it's actually, get the Swahili out. Pole pole. It's going to slowly get there, and they hopefully will get this asset back. And looking at the geology of this area, it does continue down to the southeast, a number of extremely exciting looking targets. And these are moderate size, but very exciting, as well as they actually have a tailings project.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That was just the tip of my tongue. Yeah, I think that's, is it 50,000 ounces, round about that from memory, I think, in the tailings dump.
I think it was a little more than that, but it also has silver in there as well, which is something to note, especially with silver prices being what they are. And that's actually formed from, quite interesting, a different form of deposit. It was actually from that tailings deposit is from volcanic massive sulfide, or VMS deposit, that was mined again historically on the land package they've got, and the tailings they've got are from that. That was actually mined for copper and gold, but I guess ironically now it's a gold silver tailings play, just because these VMSs are generally polymetallic. So yeah, there's a lot of exploration potential in that western part of Kenya, and if we can see some movement with the government and how that actually progresses, Red Rock is sitting on a rather exciting looking project over there, and it's certainly one I'll be keeping an eye on, because I'm very interested in that part of East Africa. So
the thing that's interesting as well about that project, because I've actually followed Red Rock for a long time. I know a bit about this particular project. They've actually got two sets of drilling data, because I believe that it was a Canadian company. I think it was Kansai Mining, from memory, originally drilled it, and it was NI 43101. And then when Red Rock took it over, they obviously had to get up to a JORC standard, so they basically re-drilled everything. So I mean, Red Rock have got a full set of drilling data. They've got the existing drilling data, so it's it could be a game changer for the company if they get it back. Because you say it's a 1.3 million ounce resource. Is that right, from memory?
I thought it was 1.2, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know if they've added all of the data, because they had a 2011 and a 2012 drilling campaign, and that was meant to continue, of course. But sadly, that came to an end when politicians started doing what they do best,
It's 100% owned as well. If they get it back, it's 100% Red Rock. So that's a big positive as well. And also from memory, you might know better, Charlie. There is is it Goldplatz? I think.
Yes, down to the southeast on the trend of them. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an operating mine there. I can't remember the name.
I believe it's on care and maintenance at the moment.
Yeah,
I think that's because of COVID.
Yeah.
But,
so there is scope, for infrastructure within a close proximity. So yeah, no, it's if they get it back, it'll come out of the blue. Wake up one morning, 7 o'clock. There you go, bang, Red Rock now. I've got a 1.2 million ounce resource back in Kenya. Yeah, interesting if that comes off.
And with the silver kicker as well, which I was quite like silver at the moment. They're hearing from the Canadians. They're talking about some of the commentators of silver reaching, was it $40-50 an ounce? So it'd be quite interesting if that happens.
Yeah. I've got my Matthew Johnson silver bars in the house, so I have. I was giving some of them away, but I'll be keeping them. I think they're only 1 ounce ones, but I'll keep a hold of them because the silver price has doubled from its 2020 low. I think it was $12, maybe $13.
You did get down there on paper, but you couldn't physically get your hands on it. You're still having to pay. I think it was about $15 an ounce. There was just this kind of discrepancy between the two, and it seems to be following the silver chart. Just generally what's happening with silver. It's all being bought up by these ETFs. If you listen to Sprott Money and podcast or Rick Rules and all them, they're talking about these ETFs buying up 6, 8, 10 million ounces in a day, and the world only produces around 2 million ounces of silver per day. Then you take into account that 80% of that material of silver is meant to go into industrial uses. Well, there's going to be a pinch point, and that's why I'm certainly seeing silver is just it's actually relatively. No one really. There's only a couple of producers who specialize in mining silver. The rest of it is all silver credits from lead zinc operations and copper operations. So there we go. There's a little
Mark's got you've got an interesting start about silver, haven't you, Mark, in ETFs? Can you dig that one up from the memory bank?
What was that stat? Was it what was it, Kenny? Was it that the amount of about the paper contract?
Of all the paper contracts, that one.
Of all the paper contracts for silver that are currently going. Well, I don't know about currently, but certainly when I read this, which wasn't too long ago, if everyone stood to deliver that silver, there's not enough silver in the entire world, mined or unmined, to deliver that 20 times over.
That's what I've been hearing. Not quite to that extent, but wow.
Yeah, it's crazy numbers, so it is. But all right, so moving on with Red Rock, because we're kind of just getting into waffle, but that's fine. This is what this podcast's about. Obviously, they've got their two main gold projects. They've also got a gold royalty with the Colombian mine. I don't think it's worth spending a lot of time in that. I think it's spread over quite a number of years. Obviously, their other core asset, which I don't know a lot about, so hopefully you do, is the Jupiter Mines investment that they've got.
Manganese asset in South Africa.
Yep.
Yeah. I believe that's quite an interesting asset. Actually, something to note about manganese asset is in South Africa is they rely heavily on their profitability relies heavily on the oil and gas prices, or oil prices, just because of where they're located and being such a bulk commodity. If the oil prices are low, generally manganese companies start making quite a bit of money, just because it is one of these margin games. And so I'm sure if we look back specifically at Jupiter, they're going to be doing pretty well at this point in time. But no, I've personally been focusing on the Kenyan asset and Victoria Goldfield. So
Yeah, I think the actual manganese mine. I mean, it's got a crazy. I think it's a minimum 100 years life of mine. You know, it's a massive resource. Shippy. I was trying to think of the name there, and it came to Shippy mine.
But they do have their own railway next to it as well. So it's suddenly, it's built. The infrastructure's kind of very much built for it. It's there to be mindful. It's one of these generation operations.
Yeah, and obviously it's a two-pronged investment as well, because obviously they've got the investment in Jupiter Mines, which at one point in the deepest, darkest days of COVID covered the entire Red Rock market cap. I think the investment's worth about, at that time, I think it was £2 million. And Red Rock was only worth like 1.7 or something at the time. So it's a liquid asset that they can sell if needs be. But obviously the interesting thing is that asset, obviously it pays a nice, the Jupiter Mines investment pays out quite a tasty dividend as well every year. So I think hopefully the company will keep a hold of that asset and just keep getting the dividend every year. And also in Jupiter Mines, I don't know if you're aware that they've got this. I think it's Mount Ida iron ore project, which it's pretty remote from memory. I don't think it's got great infrastructure, but obviously the price of iron ore now is obviously rocketed over the last 2 or 3 years. So obviously the asset is a lot more interesting now that it's probably economically viable. And I believe
it's moving at the moment, is it?
Well, I believe they're going to try and IPO it. So they are, and there was an announcement a couple of weeks ago. And I think the other carrot for Red Rock is if they do manage to IPO it, Red Rock have got a royalty on this particular project. And I think they've already started discussions with potentially selling some of this royalty if the project's going to get IPO'd. So there's lots of irons in the fire with Red Rock, and obviously Andrew's been about a while, and I mean, he'll probably listen to this and he'll know he's like Marmite. Some people love him, some people hate him, and it's just the way it is. I mean, I was in Red Rock, 10, 12 years ago, and then I kind of fell out of love with it. I fell out of love with investing, not just Red Rock, but obviously back in the game, and there's some attractive assets in Red Rock, and if you can just look at the assets and just get on with it, I definitely think there's opportunities there, and that's why I'm a buyer. And just from a pure investment point of view, it's got 1 pence written all over it to me. If the Kenyan asset comes back, it's 1 pence in a flash, and probably more. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've silenced everybody. Obviously, I'm saying Red Rock share price at 1 pence. Everybody's stunned, but no, that's where I think it could go if they get the Kenyan asset back. 1 pence is not an issue. And it's moving.
No, the Kenyan asset is key.
Yeah, key. And then anything that happens in Victoria with the joint venture is obviously a bonus. And then you've got the kind of core Jupiter Mines investment and dividend, and then the other carrot getting dangled with the IPO of Mount Ida iron ore. So, yeah, I like it. I'm buying it. So I might have another nibble, by another million or so, but I'm pretty much content with what I've got so far. So there we go. I think we've probably talked Red Rock to death already. So we'll go from the old and we'll talk about the new.
Yes, on very much new Panther metals
Yes.
with their Australian and their Canadian assets, gold assets.
Mm.
Actually quite a bit more of a different design, being that they want to go for single commodity, and they're just going for safe jurisdictions. So quite a bit different from Red Rock. But
Yeah, Dan,
no, yeah,
Dan stated that quite often. He's completely focused on gold. I mean, we've had him in the Market Musings podcast before. It's gold and safe jurisdictions, which it floats a lot of people's boat. If I mean, gold's great. Uh, Gold in Australia or Canada is even better. Gold in Africa is good as well, but if you can get it in Canada or Australia, it's even better with the stability. But sorry, I interrupted you there, Charlie. I'll let you continue.
no. I would actually possibly, I guess, somewhat debate whether or not it's better. The word better, just because, well, if you can get your market cap down in an African jurisdiction, and you've got good social connections, and it's a relatively safe jurisdiction, suddenly that's certainly going to be better than having to pay quite a hefty sum to be opening up operations in Canada in the middle of nowhere, or with the environmental kind of bureaucratic tape work you have to do in some of these
Yeah, yeah, I'll take that on board. Some good points. I think
I've
with
just
people
got to say,
looking.
sorry.
Yeah, obviously you've got plenty of experience in Africa, so maybe I'm being a bit ignorant, but I think there's a lot of people who just have this stigma where they just say, no, this company invests in African projects. I'm not going to invest in them. They just make that decision there and then. They don't look at the projects in depth, and they don't look at some of the countries in Africa, like Botswana, for instance. So it's one of the best places to do mining in the world. So yeah, I'll take some of that back. It's
Yeah.
it's
Well, UK, we nationalised our coal, so it's not just African countries.
yeah, definitely. So where do you want to start with, Panther? Obviously, we'll go to Australia, or do you want to go to Canada? What I think obviously Australia is a bit more early stage. Uh, Obviously, two projects in the Northern Territory, and they've obviously been doing a lot of desktop reviews in the last couple of months. What's your thoughts on Maracay and Anabaru?
To be honest, first of all, I was actually quite sceptical, just because of some of the things I'd been looking at from a glance. I remember them talking about alluvial projects, and I almost dismissed them. But actually, these results that they've come out with from the desktop study are actually quite remarkable. It's certainly not what you'd call elephant country, like their Canadian asset, but still they're in the proximity to some pretty interesting looking deposits. There's Tom's Gully, 1.1 million ounces, million ton at 8.9 gram per ton deposit, which that's a big, it's a rich deposit, if
Yeah,
it's not necessarily that big. And then Rustler Roost, 1.6 million ounces of 1 gram per ton. So those are sizable projects, and 8.9 gram per ton. That's quite a good grade project to be getting on with. 1.1 million ton. That's still, well, that's gonna be a good one for someone like Panther, with their experienced board. I always point out their relationship with Ariana through Kiram. Kiram put that actually to get that deposit, that project all the way from early stage exploration through to production. Those are the sort of things that you need to see in a board,
yeah,
and Panther have got that. It's quite a key thing for a board to have gone through that and kind of go. They're going to know when to take a project forward, when to sell it on, or how to just organize and structure the business to whatever merits it needs for its future. Anyway, historic work that's been done, and I'll try and pronounce these projects. Manaburo?
Annaburu and Maracay. That would be my...
Annaburu. So historically identified through Newmont with some trenching. I quite like 5 meters at 6.68 grams per ton is quite a good grade to be starting off with. Trenching, just so people know, that it's quite literally is a trench that goes across a vein. So we're not going along the length of it, you're going across it. And you're taking a chip sample. So it's almost like a vertical drill hole. And quite often, especially in underground grade control, it is considered as an underground vertical drill hole. Those are good grades, straight there. 5 meters, that's 5 meter thick intersection. And to keep up those grades at surface, again, fantastic. And also they've got historic drill holes here, 2 meters at 3.1 gram per ton gold. Again, exciting grades. And if they do have a system there pumping out these sorts of gold grades, that generally indicates you're in a very strong mineralizing system, and these grades are going to keep on occurring in this area. And as long as they hold sufficient amounts of ground and are on strike to these major fault structures, and that is what they have identified, major faults and fold structures, which these are the things that host the mineralization. That's a great start for an early stage exploration company. It's having the right structures and geochemical indicators. Beautiful. So that's Annaburu. And then Maracay, again, some interesting grades here. 2 meters at 9.32 grams per ton, 2 meters at 5.74 grams per ton. So we're not talking about very wide, low-grade pits. We're talking about something that could be quite narrow. And when we then talk about something that's quite narrow, Ariana again, their Red Rabbit project, it's a very good analogy, I think, because that was a relatively narrow vein system which they went in and mined, open pit at surface. And you never know, in the future they could be going underground on these things in a very selective mining manner. And when you do have these narrow veins with high grades, your capex isn't that much because you're taking less material through a processing plant. And
selective.
It just makes it's you're not having all of your ore diluted. So a porphyry system, when people say porphyries, and I think I've said this before, actually gets a bit worrying when you hear the word porphyry, because you think suddenly less than 1% copper and less than 1 gram per ton gold, and you're talking about billions of dollars to get this thing into production. Well, suddenly now you're talking about a 2 meter wide, 10 gram per ton vein. Well, that's not unrealistic for a medium-sized company or an explorer like Panther to actually end up getting into production with something like that.
And obviously with Kerem on board, I mean, he knows all about it. The journey from Ariana. I mean, I think that's been about a 14-year journey. I think from discovery to production, which is actually quite quick, because it probably takes about 10-12 years to get a mine from start to finish. So it does. So he's done extremely well in that period of time.
Yep, and that area, talking a little bit, I guess, about Ariana. Still got epithermal veins all over the place. So their exploration upside, that's still going to be growing. And I think recent results, they have been growing their resource through additional exploration. So there you go.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out as well that, I mean, obviously everybody thinks gold in Australia, and they all talk about or Western Australia, Victoria, and to a certain extent South Australia as well, with the sort of Gawler crating. But yeah, actually, Charlie, the Northern Territory is not to be sniffed at. I mean, you look at sort of historical production. I think I'm just looking at a stat here. It's produced 15 million ounces in the past, and they reckon there's a further 17 to 20 million ounces still to be discovered. So, no, Panther's definitely in the right place. They've got some nice early stage projects that have they've pinpointed some exciting stuff very cheaply, because obviously a desktop review, there's no boots on the ground, so they've managed to gather a lot of data at not much cost. And obviously, talking about boots on the ground, I suppose that's the next stage, especially for the Anabaru project. That would be the next phase, you would think, getting guys on the ground once COVID lifts.
Oh, certainly. I'd be raring to get onto there and getting some sampling done, get some mapping done, and going ground truth some of this historic data.
Definitely, definitely. All right. Okay, I hope you're going to help me out here with the Canadian gold, because there's quite a lot to talk about with the Canadian prospects. It was one prospect, quite a small one. The Big Bear started out quite a small project, but they've added to it over the last 18 months, and it's now quite a large project. But they've been very active in the last couple of weeks with this Dotted Lake acquisition as well. I wonder if you could actually explain a bit more about the Hemlo Greenstone Belt and the actual Hemlo mine, because I think our listeners would probably benefit from an understanding of what goes on in that part of Ontario.
Well, no, that'd be the answer. I can't really tell you too much about that. No, they I'd need to be going off and doing a bit more of my own due diligence on the actual geology of that area. It's certainly one that's picked up a lot of interest over the last few years. It's been picked over for years and years and years. But it is a quite remote part of the world. So as these larger mines have been coming in, building the infrastructure in, de-risking these areas, they've produced more exploration models. And this is something that Panther have really been able to jump on top of, because the old timers got everywhere, and they have tested huge amounts of land, and Panther managed to pin together a number of these small tenements together at the Big Bear project and the Dotted Lake. They pinned them all together to turn them into something that was large enough to suddenly actually to do some proper exploration, and that's what they've been able to do over in Big Bear, and they're starting to do that Dotted Lake. And then they've all got known mineral occurrences on it. They're along these large kind of greenstone belt features, which have still got a huge amount of exploration potential on. But I was looking at a map actually Darren posted. It was, I think, about a week or so ago. It's public domain data and the like. But you could see the new area that they've been picking up within these kind of metamorphosed sediment packages between these large granitic ore bodies, huge faults with these numerous fault structures going within it, and then dotted all around them are all of these mineral occurrences where grab samples have been taken, and copper, gold, even lead and zinc coming up in these samples. And why these things haven't progressed further is a numerous number of reasons. But what's fantastic is they have been able to pin down this land. It is in the right place. It's in the right time. And we're seeing some quite big developments in the area. And I didn't get the opportunity this morning to look over it. But there is Hemelo Exploration and
Yeah,
what's
Hemlo
Lim?
Explorers. Hemlo Explorers,
That's
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, the dotted lake just sits from my limited knowledge. It sits, I think, I'm going to say it's 15 kilometres north of the Hemlo mine, which has historically produced, I think, 22 million ounces of gold, and just about 1 kilometre south of the dotted lake footprint, there's a company called Hemlo Explorers, and they announced today that they'd raised $3 million for an aggressive drilling campaign on their tenements, and they've got some great historical drilling intersections. And in fact, there was one nice graphic that I think Dan pushed out as well. It was a soil sampling campaign, just literally 1 kilometre south of the dotted lake, and they were getting soil samples up to 1 grams per tonne. So, they've got their neighbours that have got $3 million in the bank, plus they had just raised money recently as well. So I'm going to take a stab and say they've got at least $4 or $5 million to go and drill the hell out of this. I think it's called the Hemlo, the Northern Limb. I think it was called. That's a project, just from memory, because I just glanced over it.
It was the Lim something.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a great position for Panther to be in. They've got this big contiguous block, 15 kilometres north of the Hemlo mine. Their neighbours have got a big pot of cash. They're ready to drill hell out of it. So Dan and Panther can just sit back and watch what comes out of that particular program. Obviously, they'll be. I'm assuming they'll be doing all the desktop reviews under the sun as what they've done with the Big Bear, and obviously the Big Bear, which is further west, but still on the same Hemlo Greenstone belt. Obviously, it benefits. It's got the exploration program, which is just completed, and obviously they flew a helicopter survey as well. So those results must be incoming from some of the rock chip sampling and whatever else they were doing on the ground. So that'll be really interesting to see what comes out of those results. And some of the companies in Ontario are doing really well. I think it's Great Bear Resources. I don't know if you're aware of that company.
Yes. Yeah.
Charlie, I mean, some of the grades that they're kicking out are just astonishing at the moment. So they are. I think they had one intersection the other day, and it was. I wish I'd brought it up. I can't even remember, but it was like off the scale. It was off the scale.
I've been seeing them popping up on some of my kind of email notifications, and you just see kind of Great Bear intersect, and then you just see this fantastic number, and you're kind of like, how on earth do you keep on producing something like that? And it is really when these orogenic systems, when you get the right structures, the right either kinks, folds, lithological contact, changes, or what have you, whatever it is that's creating the a particular condition. That there are a large number of conditions. That's why I'm not being a bit vague about it. But there's a large number of conditions which suddenly cause the gold to just come out of solution, and it goes ballistic, the amount of gold that can come out of these things. And that's why when you look at these projects, you're suddenly talking about 10 million ounces. You look at West Africa, 20 million ounces here, 5 million ounces there. And it really is these huge structures which allow that huge amount of fluid to be passed along. And if that structure can be open and closed, these pumping it basically creates the way the fluids pass along is almost a pumping structure, often caused by earthquakes. That repeating occurrence allows these gold deposits just to build up, and yeah, you get it right, and it is fantastic. But you have to remember, for every hole that hit, they've had 3 that have had poor or moderate grades, and that again, like I was saying earlier, was this nuggety effect. So it's well worth this is something again I've noticed. Kind of a style of fundraising that these orogenic target mining companies go for is they will actually put together a lot of money together. They won't do a kind of a 3,000 meter drilling campaign. They'll do a large drilling campaign. They'll raise a large amount of money. You're saying $3 million there, I guess. But often it could be quite a bit more. Let's take, for example, Fosterville South. That was 15 million, if I'm not mistaken. Those budgets allow the company to kind of say, shareholders, got to be quiet. We're going to do a lot of drilling. A lot of the holes are going to come out blank, but the geologists are going to be looking at the right structures, and we know because you've chosen the right management, the right technical team to be taking this forward. Look, just sit back, we'll do it, and boom, that's what they do. And that's what many of these Canadian companies do. They don't rely on one or two holes to come up with good grades and to go back to the market and do another fundraising. They'll get the big fundraising and bang, that's what they go after.
Yeah. No, it's a great position for Panther to begin with, to now have two, large projects, as you say, in the right place at the right time in Ontario. And I think another thing that people won't be aware about the Big Bear project either is that there's actually a project called the Lake Superior North Shore, which is actually south and adjacent to the Big Bear footprint, and it's got a 1 million ounce resource. But I mean, I've tweeted it out a few times and nobody's really sort of picked up on it, and that's adjacent. So I mean, there is deposits dotted all over the place. So no, it's. No, down and his borders position Panther well. They've got two projects in Canada that they can sit and watch. They won't sit and watch. They'll be active on the ground, but they'll benefit from all the activity that's going on round about them. Especially this newly acquired dotted lake, and the drilling campaign that's obviously about to start at the. I wish I can remember that name. The Hemlo Northern Limb, I think it's called. But no, it's exciting times ahead for Panther.
And they've got good geologists there as well. A local Canadian, and then there's another old, Fieldy, that they've got there, a prospector they're working with. It's always actually quite interesting to work with a prospector because they generally haven't got a geological background. They've just got experience on being on the ground. Which definitely brings a different twist to things. And actually, one of my mates also, he's the geologist on the ground there as well, doing the soil sampling campaign. Mm-hmm. He lives in the area. So one thing he was telling me about the Big Bear area is it's actually really hard going through all the bush they've got there. Mm-hmm. So that might also be another reason why these projects haven't really been explored that well, is do you really want to go trekking through hard, dense bush to look for these gold projects in the past? You kind of go for the easiest stuff first, don't you?
Yeah.
So
that's why I'm carrying an extra 4 or 5 stone, Charlie. I keep saying to Dan, if you're wanting somebody to just clear a bit of bush, I'll just walk through it and it's done. But he's never taken me up on that yet. Neither he has. So Dan, if you need somebody to do a bit of clearing in your prospects in Ontario, I'm your man. Dear, I've not been drinking, honestly, Charlie. I've not had a drink. It's just one of those days. But no, it's been pretty interesting. I mean, Mark, obviously, I've been talking about too much. Have you got anything to ask Charlie before we sign off for the night?
No, I think it's a good length of time. I like to just sort of sit back and let you two chatter away, and I sort of take it in. Particularly if Charlie knows his stuff, and you obviously know a lot about these projects, Kenny. So may as well just let you two chat away and absorb it. But it's been very informative. So it's an hour we've been talking for. Yeah. So very good. I look forward one day, Charlie, to getting out on site with you and witnessing you seeing, observing how beautiful everything is that you're looking at, and being in awe of the deposits. I think it would be quite nice to see that. So hopefully, when COVID restrictions lift, so we can travel again, and you'll be able to get out and see
Maybe I'll
some
have
deposits.
to get out my rock collection and show you what features, textures, and that'll be the plan of action.
Get out your rock collection. Yeah, that sounds fun. Yeah.
We could do a live podcast.
We could.
Yeah, we could do that.
We
could. I don't know. We could. Yeah, that's food for thought. You've sown a seed there, so you have, Mark. We'll need to speak to the powers that be and see if we can get finance to go to deepest, darkest Africa or something that. And
that'd be good.
But anyway, right. Good stuff, Charlie. I appreciate your time as usual, and hopefully same time next month, and we'll talk about another couple of companies. I'll maybe try and I'll try to think of one a bit left field, something different for a change that we've maybe not looked at. But there's one company I would maybe like to talk about at some point in the future, Charlie. I don't know if you've came across them, because there's a bit of Scottish gold in there. Is Eris Resources?
Oh yes.
Yeah, I would love to talk about Eris Resources, just for the fact that the Scottish projects, the gold projects, are on the same fault line as obviously Conroy in Ireland, Conroy Gold. So yeah, I'll look at that story, and I think there's a great. In fact, we could do a whole Scottish night. We could do Scott Gold Resources, and we could do Eris Resources. What do you think?
Sounds good. I've had a friend who used to work for Scott Gold, so I'm sure I encourage him to come on and talk about his experience of working, doing gold exploration up in Scotland.
Right, okay, we need to wear kilts that night as well, so we do, and eat haggis and drink whiskey. That'll be mandatory, so well. Anyway, yeah, I'm definitely talking rubbish now. We're going to end this podcast before it gets stupid, or even more stupid. But right, great. Thanks for your time anyway, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
Okay,
thanks,
cheers.
Mark and Kenny, for having me on again.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to another podcast from Market Musings with Fairbairn and